Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you. Whether you're listening on a 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which you can download for free, you can use for free. And there's a new way to consume the show on a daily basis, and that's by watching it anywhere you scroll. As long as you follow at 740 KVOR, at Extra Sports 1300, or you can follow me at GingerWatch on Instagram, at Gingerly Tweets on X. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts. You could call or text into the show at 719-247-1313, or if you are watching this show, you can always drop a comment on your social media platform of choice. Let's start here because this serves as a decent lesson, I think. I was a little hesitant over the last couple of days to, truly go in on Christian Pulisic over his performance, or more accurately, over him leaving the game. And I don't think I had a ton of restraint in doing it, but in my head I was like, it's like my dad, maybe your dad, maybe you say this to your kids. Are you hurt or are you injured? If you're hurt, you could play. If you're injured, you can't. And I always think about that. And when I watch a player go out like Christian Pulisic did the other night against Belgium, I go, well, maybe he's injured. Maybe he's not just hurt. Maybe it's not just a tweak or something. Maybe it's something more than that. And the post-game press conference, or the post-game comments that Christian Pulisic made, I don't think helped him at all. But he was dealing with, perhaps, the absence of some information. It turns out in his leg, he had a bone bruise and a microfracture. Now, the recovery time is weeks, not months. So the characterization that essentially Christian Pulisic broke his leg, I don't think is totally fair. That makes it sound worse than it really is. But a bone bruise, a microfracture could have been enough to chase him from the game. And it's just, the question is, does that change your mind? Now knowing that it's more than he rolled his ankle or something like that this is a bone bruise, a microfracture, does it change at all your perception of the evening that Christian Pulisic had and him leaving the game? And I think it has to a little bit. You have to understand a little bit more why he left the game, because that kind of an injury, even if he didn't break his leg, could be incredibly painful. And in a sport like soccer, where you're running from end to end in a position that he plays, that could be incredibly painful and incredibly difficult for him to continue on. So I think as far as him leaving the game, I at least think, you know what, maybe it wasn't as egregious. Maybe he didn't abandon his team, although I never said he abandoned his team. But maybe you understand a little bit more why he ultimately left the game. But him leaving the game and being one of many players on the U.S. men's national team the other night that just completely lost whatever they had gained throughout the course of the tournament and looked completely overmatched and completely lost, and that the moment was way too big. Christian Pulisic was right there. right? And maybe he's one of the players that you expect that less from, given that he's one of the guys that does play in Europe, that he's been one of the faces of this team for years. The moment for him should not be as big as it is for some of the other players. But what this allowed was to many people in the U.S. soccer world to tee off on Christian Pulisic. And a lot of their criticism actually isn't entirely focused on the match against Belgium. It gave them license to say, this is another thing in a long line of things from Christian Pulisic that makes you question whether this guy should be the face of U.S. men's soccer, that he should be as relied upon as a player as he is. You know, there have been other moments where he's come up short. He has prioritized rest and recovery and has left U.S. men's national team camp to do that. So I just find it very interesting that the criticism that has lingered over the last few days is not really about what happened against Belgium. It's really about what Christian Pulisic has been for how many months? Let's just say for the last 4 years leading up to this World Cup. Go back to Qatar and start there and then go till now. And when all of that is laid out, whether it's Carly Lloyd, whether it's Landon Donovan, whether it's Tim Howard, you start to get a fuller picture of, one, maybe this is something like the other night was always going to happen. I think that when you have an event where so many casuals come in, they don't quite understand the backstory. And we had a text from Chris yesterday that I thought was a great text and a great piece of information to throw out. You know, if you follow him I think a lot of people just see that he plays in Italy and see that he plays in Europe and go, well, this guy should be the best player on the team. He should be the face. Look, he's playing in Europe. But if you followed his form at Milan, not only was he not a focal point of what that team was doing, he was in and out of the starting 11. He wasn't even a staple in the lineup on a week-to-week basis. So there's a difference here. It's great that he's talented enough to play in Europe, because I think that's the pathway that we want our players to take. But when you get there, what are you doing? Are you contributing? Are you the best player on that team? And it was clear, if you go back, as Chris didn't have to go back, he just knew, like, hey, this guy hasn't really produced, to say nothing of what he was with the U.S. men's national team. Because let's not forget that one of the recent goals he had before the World Cup broke a goalless streak of how long? Years. He hadn't scored a goal in forever for the U.S. But even with his club team, it wasn't like he was lighting it up. And I think him leaving the game opened the door for a lot of people who follow the sport closer than most, that are embedded to some degree with the U.S. men's national team, either because they played on it or because they're in the, like Carly Lloyd, in the U.S., part of U.S. soccer. And they said, this is my opportunity to let everyone know the true Christian Pulisic, that what you saw against Belgium is not uncommon. It's not out of character. This is a guy that maybe the U.S. should never have put all their stock into and look at as the face of their team. And what McDonald's and other corporations want to do to market the team is one thing, with him being in the the commercial with Lionel Messi for, I think it was Michelob Ultra. Like, what these companies choose to do is different. But what U.S. soccer should be doing, should they be kind of pushing him to the side a little bit and saying, this is not the guy that we want representing us, and everybody saying this is our best player, this is the guy that's going to lead us? Maybe there are other options. So the announcement or the report that the injury was, I think you can say, more severe than what it sounded like or what it appeared, but also not, again, I cannot stress this enough, the guy didn't like fully break his leg. Maybe you're a little bit easier on him now for what happened against Belgium. But it gave some people the opportunity to kind of paint a full picture of who this guy has been, and maybe he's not who we should be pinning all our hopes and dreams on as U.S. soccer fans. So Christian Pulisic, a bone bruise and a microfracture, the recovery time for this. And I said this the other day when he made the comment about he'll get to rest. Like, nobody cares. Not nobody. Most people don't care what the next few months of Christian Pulisic's career looks like. Right or wrong, most people don't. So the fact that his recovery is weeks, not months, it's good news for him. But it doesn't do the U.S. men's national team any good. But my big takeaway, just watching people and listening to people who know better than I do and know better than most of us, it just was very interesting that it feels like they were champing at the bit, waiting for their opportunity to tee off on Christian Pulisic and talk about why he's not what maybe we've made him out to be. And a disastrous performance against Belgium, a disastrous exit, his early exit from that match, and him being as culpable as anybody in the U.S. falling flat on their face against Belgium was that opportunity, right? Couldn't say that after the Paraguay match. Couldn't probably say it at any point when the U.S. was in it, because it was all positivity and all hype and the train with the momentum and everything like that. It would be a very weird time to say, remember the Gold Cup, remember that he left camp and all this kind of stuff, because you would be painted as a hater. Like, we're all, wrapping ourselves in the American flag and getting excited about what this team could be. And you're sitting here raining on our parade, trashing our best player and the face of our team. But once they bowed out, really at any point, embarrassing exit or not, the embarrassing exit just made people even more receptive to what Donovan and Howard and Carly Lloyd have been saying. But at any point, if they would have bowed out, I think that was going to be the time where we started to hear, like, wait a minute, moving forward, this is not the guy. 719-247-1313. Does today's report of how severe Christian Pulisic's injury is change your perception at all about him, about his exit from the Belgium match, and about his future as the face of U.S. soccer? 719-247-1313. Just getting going on this Thursday edition of the show. Coming up next, there's been an interesting, I don't even want to say it's a report. Some people in the know in the NHL have recently theorized that maybe the Avalanche were big game hunting at a certain position. Who they were maybe looking at and what that means, coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Doesn't seem like there's a ton of sympathy out there for Christian Pulisic upon the us all finding out that it's a microfracture and a bone bruise, why he left that loss against Belgium. Pulling up a couple of texts here. Chris and Albert are both in at 719-247-1313. Chris says, Mahomes had a high ankle sprain and still won 2 playoff games and a Super Bowl on it. Pulisic is a wuss. Albert says Steve Yzerman played an entire playoffs winning the Stanley Cup with no cartilage in his knee. Jack Youngblood broke his fibula in the divisional round of the playoffs and still played, just taping it up. When the team needs a captain, the task is immense and the true desire to win is present. There's no bone bruise that's going to stop you playing. So, and then adds playing in the Pro Bowl on a broken leg sounds crazy in today's sports culture. Yeah, that unheard of. That wouldn't even be a thought. Okay. And I don't think you guys are wrong at all. I'm just saying there's a little bit more to this than what it appeared and what it sounded like. And it's like, okay, I have a little bit more understanding, but I'm with you. I do still am left with the question, like, or the rebuttal, I suppose, of, but it was the biggest match in U.S. men's national team history. Right? This was everything. You know, I hate to go there, and I hate to, question an athlete and how much they're giving their team, right? And what they can and cannot fight through. But it's still ringing. Even when I read that report today, I was thinking, but it's the biggest match in the history of the U.S. men's national team. Right. And Pulisic didn't help himself after. Like, we have to be honest about this too. He's like, I'll get a rest and it'll be okay. Like, you can't say that. Because for the vast majority of people watching that match against Belgium, forget weeks. There's no tomorrow. I don't know what percentage it is, 50%, 75%, 90% are going to be out on soccer until the next World Cup. So it doesn't matter that, you'll be fine. Like, maybe we care about you being fine in 4 years. So, but that's also why with Landon Donovan and Tim Howard and Carly Lloyd painting the full picture for us, I think that also adds to it, where you go, okay, just in a vacuum, maybe you can have a little bit more understanding on why Pulisic left the game, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum. He didn't just spawn out of nowhere to play in the game against Belgium. And I think that was what they were trying to do, is say, hey, go back here. What happened against Belgium is on brand. It follows a thread. It's indicative of who this guy has been. That maybe there's a simple way to phrase this, that maybe the name on the back of the jersey means more than the crest on the front of it. And you hate to say that when we're talking about playing at the national team level. But listening to them, that's where I come down on him. And even if you could even put it this way, he's a player that hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's the best way to put it here. Because of his prioritization of rest in the past. That maybe he hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt. And I think that was the initial reaction from everybody, was a byproduct of that. Oh, here he goes again. He was hurt earlier in the tournament. Now he's hurt again. He had to leave, camp to rest, and he's not a player that has earned the benefit of the doubt, at the very least. At the most, this is a guy that prioritizes his brand over the crest on the front of his shirt. But the bottom line here is the next World Cup, he's going to be a supporting character in that story. I think we can all agree on that. You got 4 years to build back up this brand. And let's be honest, there are going to be plenty of people, myself included, that are going to ignore logic and reason and buy in to the U.S. men's national team. I'm able to say what I said the other day about this is as far as the U.S. men's national team is going to go for the foreseeable future. I can say that because I have a clear mind and I'm not getting swept up in the patriotism and how star-spangled awesome, the World Cup has been for the U.S. men's national team. With a more level head, I'm like, yeah, they're never going to do more than what they just did. But I'm also a romantic, so I'll, like Michael Scott says, I'll be ready to have my heart broken again. But over these 4 years, a thing that the U.S. is going to have to do is prop up somebody other than Christian Pulisic. Not saying the guy shouldn't be on the team, but who you're marketing, who you're making the face of your team, who you're putting the captain's armband on, all of this kind of stuff. You have 4 years to make somebody else the face of U.S. soccer, whether that's, Flo Balogun, whether that's Weston McKennie, whether that's, some wonderkind that we don't even know about yet that is going to be on the world stage in 4 years. This guy, in terms of being the face of U.S. soccer, that's over with. And it's in U.S. soccer's best interest. That no longer happens. Aaron texts in and says, I felt like after his injury, Pulisic tried to play through the pain but was unable. The problem was both before and after. He was a no-show earlier than that, and you absolutely cannot be publicly thankful for rest afterward. Boom. Perfect. As per usual from Aaron on the text line. That's what I'm saying. The guy hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt. If you hadn't had this history of people kind of questioning you giving it your all, when you have to bow out, even if it's a fairly severe injury, people aren't going to go there. People aren't going to assume it's a severe injury. The people that know, at least, the people that have followed it. And like I said, absolutely, you cannot talk about, I'll be good weeks from now, I'll be able to, that's, you just need to talk about how disappointed you were that you couldn't finish. And while you're at it, maybe talk about how excruciating the pain was. Just focus on that moment. Don't talk about the future because, again, nobody cares. That was the moment. And you came up short. And this from the 719, he's a soccer player. That's all you need to know. Take your thoughts. 719-24-7, 1313. We know that in the NHL, they play through a lot more severe injuries than Pulisic bowed out on. I want to get to this thought that's been out there when it comes to the Colorado Avalanche, and I'll just give you the name and we'll talk about it on the other side. How would you like to see Connor Hellebuck in an Avalanche sweater? That's next. Well, they call this the silly season, the off season for any sport, right? Where teams are throwing out a bunch of different ideas to try and get better. And I think that's at the heart of what one of the more well-regarded NHL insiders, Elliot Friedman, kind of pondered the other day. And you may have seen some blogs pick this up. This was not a report that the Avalanche were going after Connor Hellebuck. It was a well-connected insider saying some people thought that maybe they were going to make a run at Connor Hellebuck. So there's a difference, right? There are different levels to what insiders say. Some of it is just their own natural opinion. Some of it is just some hearsay. And then others are the hard reporting that they are most known for. So, again, the thought from Elliot Friedman and others in the NHL were that maybe the Avalanche were toying with the idea of making a push for Connor Hellebuck, who, as of now, is still a member of the Winnipeg Jets. The offseason, it feels like it's over, but there's still months left in it. So there's time for Winnipeg to make a deal for Connor Hellebuck if that's the route they choose to go. And I think what this is, because a lot of Avalanche fans have been, well, why in the world would they be looking at Connor Hellebuck when they have the Jennings Trophy winners in Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood? Scott Wedgwood was snubbed from being a Vezina finalist. Why in the world would they be looking to get rid of the best goaltender tandem in the NHL to bring in Connor Hellebuck? And I think the answer to that is quite simple. If you're Joe Sakic, right, and the end of the year happens, and you know that Chris McFarland is probably out the door to Nashville and you're going to be assuming general manager duties, so you're thinking about what your job is going to be over the summer, and the first thought that you should have in your head, whether you're Joe Sakic or any general manager, how can I make my team better? Right? You just start with that question. And you let your mind go to a bunch of different places. Should we make a trade for Brady Tkachuk? Should we try to trade for Connor McDavid? Should we trade Cale Makar for a bunch of prospects? I'm not saying that entered Joe Sakic's mind, but you just have to start with, okay, we didn't get to where we wanted to go. How do we get better? Well, you look at the roster of the Colorado Avalanche, and you saw it with the trade of Valeri Nichushkin. When it comes to the forward lines, there's not a ton you could do. In fact, the Avalanche were in a position where they wanted to unload salary, right? The Ross Colton deal, the Jack Drury deal, and then Valeri Nichushkin. That was all dumping salary. And they would have to dump more salary to be able to afford Connor Hellebuck. That has to be mentioned. But you look at your roster. One, you like a lot of what the Avs are doing, right? You feel like they're deep at every position. You have top line talent. You have the guys that are the grinders in the bottom six. You acquired Nazem Kadri. You want to give that another go and see a full season of him with the team. Like there's a lot right with the Avalanche. So when you're looking at how do I improve this team, well, you're not going to think about doing anything with McKinnon or Makar. And maybe they like Marty Necas, and you just start going down the list, and you're like, there's not a lot of places that we can kind of go to improve our team. And then you get to goaltending. Yes, they won the Jennings Trophy as the best goaltending tandem in the NHL. But ultimately, we're either better than Carter Hart. Right? This is where you go, we like the guys we have, but this is Connor Hellebuck. And that's what I didn't understand about the reaction from people. It's like in a sport where there are only a few like franchise level goaltenders, guys that you put in the net night after night after night and trust that they're going to deliver for you. Connor Hellebuck's one of those guys. In fact, based on the hardware that he has on a shelf somewhere in his home, you could argue he's the best goaltender on planet Earth. He had just won a gold medal in the Olympics, and he was a huge difference maker for the U.S. We didn't get to see if he could, exercise some of those playoff demons because Winnipeg didn't make it. So I think this is a natural place to go. And Connor Hellebuck was supposedly, at least available. At least Winnipeg was willing to have a conversation. So I think this is a very natural place for Joe Sakic's mind to go. And it's not so much if you have two goaltenders, you don't have any, because the NHL is moving in a direction where you need two. Really, you need two. But if one of those guys can be a Vezina Trophy winner, an MVP, a gold medal winning goaltender, then you got a great start. Now, where I think Joe Sakic's mind kind of went after that is, well, I would have to shed more salary in order to afford him. Do I have the capital necessary to be able to pull off a trade for Connor Hellebuck? And I think if Joe Sakic had that in mind, either any overtures he made with Winnipeg or just before he even picked up the phone, he kind of went, yeah, this probably isn't going to happen. But if money were no object, and forget what Winnipeg wants in return, or at least don't be fixated on it, and just if I just told you that Connor Hellebuck was available, look at the Avalanche roster. You have to ask yourself, are the Avalanche better with Connor Hellebuck in goal rather than Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood? And I think you have to say yes. I think that would make the Avalanche a better team. And this is one of the things I hate, where it's not just that Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood won the Jennings Trophy for the best goaltender tandem. It's look at the numbers. That's not the way you need to look at these things. When the Broncos added Jalen Waddle, you don't look at the numbers he had with Tua. You project what he could do with Bo Nix. That's where you need to make these decisions. With LeBron's free agency, you don't say this was the player he was in LA and he was kind of a supporting cast member to Luka. You say, what would he be on the Denver Nuggets? Connor Hellebuck would be playing on a far superior team in the Colorado Avalanche. He would have more goal support. He'd have better defensemen in front of him. I mean, this is a guy that has won a Vezina Trophy and a Hart Trophy. Could you imagine Connor Hellebuck playing with the Colorado Avalanche? Now, you still have the questions about him as a playoff goalie, but did you come at the end of the playoffs? Did you come away saying unequivocally Scott Wedgwood and Mackenzie Blackwood are a good enough tandem for the Colorado Avalanche to win a Stanley Cup? Because they weren't this year. They weren't last year. You don't know that you don't know. So, yes, Connor Hellebuck's exploits in the playoffs have been, more publicized. But I think where you ended the Avalanche playoff run, and this is where I ended it, was they got to make Mackenzie Blackwood the dude. I mean, split the time however you want, but you got to invest in Mackenzie Blackwood. You got to do what you were going to do when he got brought in. And some of it's not the Avalanche's fault. Mackenzie Blackwood was hurt to begin this season. And then Scott Wedgwood took the job, ran with it to his credit, and never once gave you a reason to pivot back if you're Jared Bednar. But at the very end of the season, you gave Mackenzie Blackwood a shot in Game 4 against Vegas, and you saw a guy perform at a level where you're like, yep, that's why we brought in this guy. His ceiling is higher than Scott Wedgwood's. But you still, at the end, don't know for a fact that you are much better equipped to win a Stanley Cup with Mackenzie Blackwood as you are Connor Hellebuyck. So if Joe Sakic is asking himself the question, how do I make my team better? There aren't a lot of spots on the team where you could say it. Goaltending might be one. You may like the tandem that they have. I wonder a little bit if Scott Wedgwood is going to be able to follow up what he did this year. Mackenzie Blackwood, to his detriment, never played well enough to make Jared Bednar alter his thinking. So I have questions about the Avalanche goaltending tandem. I like it. I think it's better than a lot of teams. But the Avalanche are Stanley Cup or bust. Anything less than going to the Stanley Cup final is not acceptable. So how do you increase the likelihood by however many percentage points of winning a Stanley Cup? And I think trading out Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood for Connor Hellebuyck is a way that you move the needle a little bit. But then the practicality of it all is where it comes undone, right? This is a team that dumped 3 players. Not saying I blame the Avalanche for trading any of them, Colton, Drury, or Valeri Nichushkin. I think that they were right on all of those fronts. Ross Colton had to go. Jack Drury was going to be too expensive, and he signs for $4.5 million per year with the Nashville Predators. There's no way the Avalanche should be expected to pay him $4.5 million a year, as much as you like Jack Drury. And the time, they probably moved Valeri Nichushkin a year too late, in hindsight. But they were cost-cutting moves, and you would have to make more of them in order to get Connor Hellebuyck. So I understand that if Joe Sakic had this thought, I understand why he may have had the thought, but I also understand why Connor Hellebuyck's not a member of the Colorado Avalanche today. Now, moving forward, he immediately becomes the number one guy on the trade deadline list. And we know Joe Sakic loves himself some trade deadline moves. It's not about July, it's about March. The way the Avalanche have operated is they make their big swings during the season because they can evaluate where they're at, what they need, and then they go out and get it. If Connor Hellebuyck does indeed get to the beginning of the season as a member of the Winnipeg Jets, and that's an open question, but if he does get there, these will become full-blown rumors, and every time either Scott Wedgwood or Mackenzie Blackwood struggles a little bit, Avalanche fans are going to be saying Hellebuyck. And I think Joe Sakic's going to be right there with you. I think the thought that Elliot Friedman threw out there, I think being as well connected as he is, I think not that he knows something, but he's very good at connecting dots. I don't think this was out of nowhere. So it's certainly something to watch out for as the rest of the offseason goes along. right? You don't need to be watching it as closely as the LeBron sweepstakes. But again, as I said at the top of the segment, we got a few months before the hockey season rolls around. There's no guarantee that the Connor Hellebuck trade market is going to not be a thing the rest of the summer. But I don't think that the Avalanche are the team that's in a position right now to go and get him. I would say Buffalo and I would say New Jersey. But if he's on the Jets when this season begins, I don't expect Winnipeg to be really any better than they were last year. They don't look like they're a playoff-bound team. We know that the Avalanche, barring something completely unforeseen and catastrophic, are going to look like one of the top Stanley Cup contenders. So I don't see the circumstances around these two teams changing very much. Once we get closer to the trade deadline, I would expect to hear a little bit more noise, read a few more rumors, and hear a few more insiders saying Hellebuck, Avalanche. How the Avs get it done, that's another question. But, I mean, as much as you like Blackwood and Wedgwood, if you could turn that into Connor Hellebuck, yeah, the Avalanche are better. I don't think there's any arguing of that. But is he worth everything that you would have to do in order to acquire him? What you would have to give up? What other salary you would have to dump to afford him? That's where you go, yeah, he'd make the team better, but I'd rather keep the rest of this team together with the goaltending tandem. And I think that if Joe Sakic was entertaining the thought of going after Connor Hellebuck, I think that's probably where he ultimately ended up. I'll take your thoughts. Do you think that the Avalanche would be more likely to win a Stanley Cup if Connor Hellebuck was their goalie as opposed to the Woodshed? 719-24-7. 13-13. Coming up next, the latest twist in the Kawhi Leonard saga, a bizarre twist, but it has impact on the Denver Nuggets and Peyton Watson. Welcome in. Great to have you. Whether you're listening to the show by downloading the Extra Sports 1300 or KVOR apps, or both would be good. Or if you're watching the show anywhere you scroll, I certainly do appreciate it. If you'd like to take your participation in today's show to the next level, I'm all for it. You could call or text into the show at 719-247-1313. You can also drop a comment on the live stream if that's how you are consuming today's show. So tell me if this makes sense. So just a little bit of background here. You are aware that there are allegations and an ongoing investigation by the NBA that the LA Clippers, when they signed Kawhi Leonard, circumvented the salary cap by giving him a no-show endorsement deal with a company that planted trees called Aspiration. Now, they'll say it's carbon credits and all that, but that's essentially what they did. They planted trees. Well, this company turned out to be completely, fraudulent, or at least the guy who was running it was scamming people and whatever. And that Steve Ballmer's argument is like, hey, I got swindled by these guys too. But the allegation is in order to sign Kawhi Leonard, they worked with Aspiration to give Kawhi Leonard a no-show endorsement that would pay him, I think, $20 million. Kawhi Leonard, along with Paul George, become members of the LA Clippers. That whole chapter is a big fat nothing burger, by the way. What are we going to remember from Kawhi and Paul George's tenure as LA Clippers? I don't blame the Clippers for going for it, but it certainly didn't get them anything close to what they were looking to get out of it. So the NBA is looking into this. Pablo Torre, who has been on Around the Horn a lot, that's probably where you know him. He has a podcast. He's been all over this thing. Fascinating stuff, and is really, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I can say this without any ramifications. It sure looks like they circumvented the salary cap. So the NBA is investigating this. Well, you know that the Clippers traded Kawhi Leonard a few days ago, coincidentally, to the Toronto Raptors. Well, the Clippers and the Raptors both came out today and said, we cannot consummate this trade as of yet. And here's the part that I say this makes no sense to me. They say because they can't consummate the trade unless the Raptors are willing to essentially be on the hook for whatever punishment the NBA is going to dole out based on their findings of the Clippers circumventing the salary cap. I suppose the NBA's justification of this is, who does Kawhi Leonard play for? That's who we have to punish. To me, I don't think it's that difficult. And maybe there's some legalese that I'm not aware of, but it seems like it makes no sense. We know the team that perpetrated this, that's the Clippers. So if they trade Kawhi Leonard, you're going to come down on the Raptors, who, by the way, are the team that lost Kawhi Leonard after winning a title because the Clippers allegedly circumvented the salary cap. So it's going to be like the Raptors get hit in 2019 because allegedly the Clippers circumvented the salary cap, so they lost Kawhi Leonard. And then they're going to get hit again because they acquired him, and the NBA is going to punish them for what the Clippers did. It was initially the Clippers statement that said that, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And then the Raptors came out and said the same thing. That makes zero sense to punish the Raptors for what the Clippers did. It seems pretty obvious. We wouldn't go, wait a minute, are they punishing the right? If they punish the Clippers, we'd all be like, well, yeah, they're the ones that you would punish. Can the NBA not follow the topsy-turvy whirlwind that is free agency to follow where Kawhi Leonard has been and where he's going? Yeah, he got traded to the Raptors several years after this circumvention took place, or at least the circumvention was agreed to. I mean, let's be fair. It's been going on this whole time. It wasn't just a one-shot deal. But, like, it seems like it's not that hard to levy punishment against the Clippers, even though Kawhi Leonard is now on the Raptors. But we'll set that aside for a moment. To me, this says that the NBA is going to levy a punishment. Okay, the guy who sits at the head of the table in the board of governors is the owner of the Toronto Raptors. Both parties, I think, are either working with some information or at least they have a strong indication or strong feeling that the NBA is going to decide that the Clippers did do something wrong and dish out a punishment. And we are back to what we talked about 10 months ago, which was, what do you do if you're the NBA? And there are really only three options here that I can see that make sense. And you could do any combination of the three. One, they forfeit draft capital. Two, you fine them. And three, you void Kawhi Leonard's contract. All of them, two of them, one of them, we can debate once the NBA actually does it on whether it's enough punishment. But those seem to be the three most logical things that you would do for this. And maybe it still doesn't make sense. So if the Raptors were to acquire Kawhi Leonard, then they would lose draft picks, be fined, and have Kawhi Leonard's contract voided? Like, as far as I'm concerned, the Clippers trading Kawhi, basically takes care of the Kawhi part of this. He's not on the Clippers anymore. They don't have him. Now, in a world that I know doesn't exist, I don't think you could do this. What I would do if I was the NBA is say, okay, Kawhi Leonard's back on the Toronto Raptors, which maybe he would have been anyway, had the Clippers not circumvented the salary cap, had Kawhi Leonard's Uncle Dennis, not asked for these things that he knew were in blatant violation of the collective bargaining agreement. Not saying Kawhi Leonard is blameless here. And maybe it's a suspension for Kawhi Leonard that the Raptors would they would definitely be on the hook for if they acquired him. But to me, Kawhi Leonard's not on the Clippers anymore. Make the Clippers give the draft picks that the Raptors traded them back. So the Clippers lose out on that draft capital, and then you find the Clippers. I don't think the NBA can do that, but I feel like in a world where collective bargaining agreements don't exist, that feels like a pretty good way to cap this all off. But the important thing is I believe that there's some punishment that's going to come down. Why it's taken them this long to figure this out? Pablo Torre, he's a terrific journalist, so I'm not downgrading him by calling him a podcaster, but he's a podcaster. Okay, you're the NBA. You're a billion-dollar entity. How does he get to the bottom of this before you do? And way before you do. So this all stinks from an NBA standpoint. Feels to me like you could have came out with something. And remember, the All-Star game was at the Intuit Dome. So there was some thought that the NBA wasn't going to dish out punishment at that time because it was solely one of their crown jewel weekends. I don't think that was ever proven, but that was some of the thought out there. But at long last, if they're concluding their investigation, and they should be concluding it because now there is a pretty significant NBA trade that is being held up because of it, there's going to be a punishment. And perhaps with the Raptors not willing to assume any risk of punishment, what this could look like to me is basically the three things. But now you're adding the trade is going to be void. The trade's not going to happen. Clippers aren't going to be able to trade Kawhi Leonard. Grady Dick and Brandon Ingram are going to remain on the Raptors. The draft picks Toronto traded LA are going back to the Raptors, or they're still with the Raptors. And then the contract of Kawhi Leonard ends up getting voided. Clippers lose any draft capital that they own, or at least some of it, and they get fined. And then Kawhi Leonard becomes a free agent. And here's where the interest level gets higher if you're a Nuggets fan. Okay, because one, Kawhi Leonard might become a free agent. And I don't know that there's any, I mean, he was at Kyle Lowry's jersey retirement or his one-day retirement the other day, but that could be out of loyalty to a teammate in Kyle Lowry more than I love being in Toronto. Who knows if Kawhi Leonard would decide to sign with the Raptors. And then the Raptors don't even theoretically have the money to pay Kawhi Leonard because they still have Grady Dick and Brandon Ingram on their roster. So now Kawhi Leonard becomes a free agent, which, yes, the Denver Nuggets should be interested. I know Kawhi Leonard's, injury history is his injury history. But in a world where the Nuggets don't have that many avenues to improve, you want to load manage Kawhi through the season and have him for the playoffs, depending on how much that would cost you, think that's a pretty good deal. So, yes, the Nuggets should be interested in Kawhi Leonard if he were to become a free agent. But now the question has to be asked, the last suitor standing for Peyton Watson is the Clippers. This impacts the Nuggets when it comes to Peyton Watson. Because now Kawhi Leonard is back on their books until the NBA, and we don't know if they will. Maybe they just suspend Kawhi Leonard and they don't void his contract. Well, now the Clippers are on the hook for Kawhi Leonard's contract. That has to impact the amount of money that they can offer Peyton Watson. So through this, it may be that there are no other suitors remaining for Peyton Watson. And now it is strictly a negotiation between the Denver Nuggets and Clutch Sports. Which means the Nuggets can just give him the qualifying offer. And that's all he would play for this year. He would most certainly leave via free agency because I don't think he'd be happy with the Nuggets deciding to do that. But technically, the Nuggets would have that ability. If there are no bidders for Peyton Watson, there's a qualifying offer that's out there. They can extend that, secure the rights to Peyton Watson, and have him on their basketball team. I don't think that's where they'll go because I think they want to keep Peyton Watson for multiple years. But this takes, a wrench out of the process here. There's not another team looming that may come in and offer more than the Nuggets are willing to offer. So this has completely broken in the Nuggets' favor. And now it's just a matter of when they are left with it's just them and Clutch Sports, how much money are they truly willing to offer Peyton Watson? But a wild turn of events here with this Kawhi Leonard thing. And again, the biggest thing is, why in the world would the Raptors have to answer for what the Clippers did? Like, that's the question that I still have. But apparently they can, and apparently it's made the Raptors not willing to acquire Kawhi Leonard. They could have still, they didn't want to. So Kawhi's still on the Clippers. Raptors all of a sudden may not be the sneaky team in the East anymore. And the final outside suitor for Peyton Watson may not be that way anymore. But for one thing, I'm thankful and appreciative of all of this because it gives us a second NBA storyline to follow besides LeBron James's free agency. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. One other thing I want to toss in here with Kawhi Leonard. Mark Stein reporting that people have told him that in the coming weeks, the NBA is going to announce its findings and render a decision, and any punishment that would come down at that time. What? I saw a tweet during the break from somebody. They completed the JFK assassination investigation in 10 months, and we're going into month 11 to find out what we kind of all know happened. I mean, watch Pablo Torre's podcast. It seems like the evidence is all there. Why didn't the NBA just bring in Pablo Torre and say, what do you have? And you can be the head investigator in this. What is taking the NBA so long? It seems like, I'm not saying it's a cut and dry case. I'm just saying, like, what else are you doing between this and how long LeBron is waiting when he probably already knows where he's going to go? Oh, yeah. Can we just get moving here? Raptors say in a statement that they're eager to bring Kawhi Leonard back to Toronto. You know, I threw out my, let the Raptors keep Kawhi, the draft picks that they gave up for Kawhi, go back to Toronto. But ultimately, this story ends about as well as it can if Kawhi Leonard is a member of the Toronto Raptors. Now, it's not the happiest of endings. It's not the best ending, because if these allegations are true, the Raptors got penalized and lost a player that helped them win a title because they weren't willing to break the rules. So getting Kawhi Leonard how many years after and how many injuries after is not, it's not going to be sweet for Toronto. It's not ultimately going to make it right, but I mean, if Toronto wants Kawhi Leonard that bad, then they should be able to have him. So what way they go about it? Is it they let the trade stand and only punish the Clippers for it, or Kawhi becomes a free agent and joins the Toronto Raptors? But again, you have Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick, who have thought for the last 2 weeks they're LA Clippers that are still Raptors. And they're in limbo. So when I say the NBA, what's taking you so long, it's not for my own edification, although I would like to see this story get wrapped up. But you have 3 players, including Kawhi. And I don't feel bad for Kawhi because he, is a part of all of this. But more Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick, where you go, they're twisting in the wind. They don't know where they're going to be playing their basketball. And I feel bad for Clutch Sports because maybe the one team they were using as leverage against the Denver Nuggets now may not be in the mood to make a bid for Peyton Watson until all this is figured out. Bizarre. And it could have been avoided. Right? And there was an article from the Toronto Star that Pablo Torre has put into his podcast that basically it was Toronto said, well, we can get you an endorsement deal with, any of our partners. Any of our partners would love to have you as an endorser. And the answer they reportedly got back was, well, Kawhi doesn't want to do the work. The work of what? Posting on social media, appearing in a commercial? Like, how much work is required to be an endorser? And it would just, if he did work for them, it would make it on the up and up. They would be paying him for services rendered. And whether they were paying him too much for that is, that's up to somebody's opinion. But if he just does something and it's not a no-show endorsement, then we're not even having this conversation. Fun stuff. Let's get to a couple of your texts on previously mentioned topics. The big news of the day that I will get my thoughts on again for you coming up at the top of the hour. Christian Pulisic has been found out that the injury that he sustained that caused him to leave the Belgium match was a microfracture and bone bruise. And my question was, does that change anything for you in the way that you view him? The overwhelming response I have gotten back is no. And it continues from Mark in Falcon. Patrice Bergeron, partially collapsed lung, played until the end of the playoff game. Pulisic really compounded it by saying World Cup is just another tournament. It's bigger than UEFA Champions League, and he doesn't get it. Donovan and Howard were studs in the World Cup and rose up. Pulisic never has. And there are people that think this is jealousy from Landon Donovan and Tim Howard. Like, we love this generation. They're the golden generation, and they're the old guys. And there is, I'm sure there's some of that. Okay, but when I listen to them speak, and Carly Lloyd is kind of the control in all of this, because Carly Lloyd is right there with them, and Carly Lloyd has no reason to have a vendetta against Pulisic because of the attention that he receives. I think her adding to it lends some credence, but it's not just them saying he's a bum. Because if they just said that, then you'd be like, okay, are you a little bit jealous of this guy because he's getting, more love from soccer fans than you guys ever did? But they're just laying out, look at him in the Gold Cup. Look at what he said. Look at the fact that he had to leave camp, all of this kind of stuff. Like, there's a pattern here when it comes to Christian Pulisic and how seriously he takes his national team duties. So, yeah, maybe underneath it all, there's a little bit of sour grapes, a little bit of jealousy, perhaps, from an older generation versus the younger one. But they're not lying. I mean, these things happened. And you're right, Mark. I mean, probably the most iconic goal in U.S. men's national team history was scored by Landon Donovan. That team, that generation, if you will, because it was teams, it was over multiple years and everything like that. That group played, they punched above their weight class. To Mark's point, they punched above their weight class. They weren't more talented than this group, but that just speaks to, the wrong mentality from this team, because the talent, I think there's 5 guys at the very least on this U.S. men's national team that are more talented than Landon Donovan. More talented. I want to emphasize that. Talented. Not accomplished. Talented. So if they had some of Donovan or Howard or Dempsey, I hold up Clint Dempsey. Like, that's the dude for me. If I could field 11 Clint Dempseys, I'd feel really good about my chances. But this team has more talent than any of those Howard, Donovan, Dempsey teams did. And yet they got no further. They did not accomplish more than those other teams did. Uh, 719-247-1313. This one coming in from the 719. I guess I opened the door a little bit here, talking about projecting the impact a player will make on your team, when I was talking about the Avs maybe not being interested in Connor Hellebuck. you have to project what Connor Hellebuck could be with the Avalanche. Would some of those playoff woes be fixed playing with a team that top to bottom is much better than any Winnipeg team that Connor Hellebuck has played for, including the one that won the President's Trophy? I'll take this Avs team over that Winnipeg team. And let's face it, Connor Hellebuck was the reason why they won the President's Trophy, or the main reason. And I threw out an example. When you talk about Jalen Waddle, you don't talk about what he was with Tua or just with Tua. You talk about what he could be with Bo Nix. Now, I was just throwing it out because Jalen Waddle is the best pickup that any Colorado team has made lately. But I did open the door. From the 719, Tua's 17-game career average is actually better than Bo Nix. Waddle will be what he was in Miami, if not worse. But when I brought that up, I wasn't saying, I guess I had a tone that would make you think I was more focused on the end of his time in Miami. I'm just saying in general, you don't say, well, he did this with Tua and then that's the end of it. You say, what could he be with Bo Nix? But yes, they were good times that Tua and Jalen Waddle had. Do I think that Jalen Waddle will be better in Denver than he was at his best with Tua? No. But if he's that good, then this trade is completely worth it. Then it's great for the Denver Broncos. I'm just saying when you evaluate, going after a guy either by trade or free agency, you don't just say he was this elsewhere. And that's the end of the evaluation. You try to project what he'll be with your team. That's all I was saying. But hey, if Jalen Waddle, what year was that when he and Tua were really humming along? If the Broncos get that level of production from Jalen Waddle, be worth it. I don't think Jalen Waddle is going to be worse in Denver. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. And I have even said that could happen and the Broncos still not win as many games as they did a year ago. I think those two things can be true at the same time. I just don't see Jalen Waddle being worse than he was. Worse by a significant margin, worse by a touchdown here, a few yards there. That's a negligible difference. But like when you say worse, it's like the numbers pale in comparison. I just don't see a scenario in which Jalen Waddle is not really good with the Denver Broncos and absolutely what they're looking for. And where that gets the Broncos is another question. But that's not a trade that look, we did this with the Russell Wilson trade. We had to look back and say it was a really bad trade. I just don't see how we're doing the same thing with Jalen Waddle. But to be fair, I don't think that's your point. I think you're talking about Bo Nix. I don't think that I think there's a negligible difference between Tua as a quarterback and Bo Nix as a quarterback. I think Bo Nix has the ability to be at the same level as Tua was at his best. And I actually think Bo Nix has the ability to sustain that level of play than Tua was. It's a better fit. It's a better fit in Jalen Waddle, even if he puts up the same numbers that he did at his peak in Miami. the Broncos will take that every day of the week, and it will be exactly what they're looking for, a go-to number one wide receiver. 719-24-7. 1313. More Drive Time Sports right after this. 1313 is the number if you would like to join in on the fun and the conversation. Christian Pulisic, the big story, the latest chapter in the Kawhi Leonard aspiration saga. And what else? What else we got? LeBron has not decided where he's going to sign yet. Oh, the Avalanche, are they or are they not interested in Connor Hellebuck? Speaking of hockey, a couple of other items from today that I think have relevance towards the Colorado Avalanche, even though it didn't have anything directly to do with them. One is this offer sheet thing that happened between the Ducks and Philadelphia. So if you have not heard, Philadelphia came in and offered Leo Carlsson, restricted free agent of the Anaheim Ducks, the richest contract in the history of hockey. $18 million a year, topping Kirill Kaprizov, who gets 17 from Minnesota. So, because it's restricted free agency, you're well-versed in this. Anaheim has a certain amount of time. They can match it, or they can take, I think it's 3 first-round picks, 4 first-round. I mean, it's a haul. It's a bounty of draft capital, but the Anaheim Ducks just made the playoffs. They're looking to advance further. They're looking to build towards being a Stanley Cup contender, not going backwards and being a rebuilding team. So they matched. Pat Verbeek, the GM of the Ducks, matched the deal. So Leo Carlsson will remain a member of Anaheim. There's egg on the face of Pat Verbeek because Leo Carlsson is your best player. Why? I mean, it's one thing for the Denver Nuggets to play the restricted free agency game with Peyton Watson. Okay, this would be like the Denver Nuggets playing the restricted free agency game. I don't want to say with let's say with Jamal Murray. Because Leo Carlsson is not Nikola Jokic, even though Leo Carlsson is Anaheim's best player. You don't play the restricted free agency game with your best player because he's going to have a market. And the thing that Pat Verbeek said today that you're like, no, duh, the cap's going up. So Philadelphia was able to offer him this astronomical deal to make him the highest paid player, knowing that they would still have a buffer because the salary cap is going up. This thought was apparently lost on Pat Verbeek, and instead of maybe getting Leo Carlsson at, he's a young player still. He's not as established, I don't think, as Kirill Kaprizov. You may be able to get him under Kaprizov's number. But they didn't. Now he's getting paid more than Kaprizov. And also you have this out there of we weren't essentially prioritizing our best player and we let him nearly get poached by another team, which I don't think goes over well at the next free agent negotiation for the Anaheim Ducks. So the Ducks handled this poorly. But they still have Leo Carlsson, so they'll be okay, I think. I don't know. I think the Ducks might take a step back this year, but they're better with Leo Carlsson than they are without him. But the impact of this regarding the Avalanche is obvious. We have a new highest paid player in the NHL. The number is 18. For Cale Makar's negotiation, if I'm Cale Makar's representative, I'm starting with that number. Just like I would have been starting with the 17 that Kirill Kaprizov got. I'm not saying I'm unwilling to back off of that number. It's a negotiation. But if I'm the representation for Cale Makar, I'm saying there's another mil thrown on at least, or maybe $2 million to say that Cale Makar should be the highest paid player in the NHL. So my number, if I'm the agent for Cale Makar, has gone up. There's a new largest contract in NHL history. That's what I want my guy to get. And what I have heard and read from NHL insiders is not revelatory, because you and I feel this way about Cale Makar. He can ask for whatever he wants and probably deserve it. And a thing that was good for his free agency, if he needed anything else going in his favor, was the fact that this team looked completely lost without him healthy on the blue line. The value of Cale Makar is now not in question. They need him. Everything that they do is based on what Cale Makar is. So you have what happened in the Vegas series. Now you have a new highest paid player in the NHL who is not as good of a player or as important of a player. As much as Karlsson is good and important to the Ducks, he's not better or more important than Cale Makar is to the Avs. So Cale Makar and his representative could go into Joe Sakic's office and ask for $18 million and deserve it. The question is that going to be where is Cale Makar going to draw a line in the sand and say, that's what I want to be paid? We remember Nathan McKinnon took less money, right? Gabriel Landeskog, if memory serves, did not take the maximum amount of money he could have taken on his big extension. So there's a little bit of peer pressure here on Cale Makar. He doesn't have to succumb to it, but there's a little bit there to say, hey, this is a team that is willing to sacrifice some of their money to make sure that they have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. I don't think it'll be peer pressure in the end. I just think it's the way Cale Makar is wired. I think he fits in well with that group. I don't think that Cale Makar is going to be the highest paid player in the NHL when this contract is signed. That's my prediction. But now he could get 17 a year and not be the highest paid player in the NHL. He could get 17.9 and not be the highest paid player in the NHL. I do think Cale Makar is, if that's the market, if that's the highest number that he could possibly get, I think he's going to go underneath it. Not way under, nor should he. Right? This is probably, I don't want to say it's his last big contract. He's going to get another one. He's young enough. But you never know. Right? His value is at the highest point that it's ever been. But I do think Cale Makar is going to leave a few bucks on the table. And look, with the salary cap going up in a sport like hockey where, you know, guys aren't being paid $20 or $30 million, you know, $2 or $3 million does go a little bit further in the NHL. And he would be doing the Avalanche a favor, and he should be, you know, given credit if he does end up taking a couple million less. But that's the impact on the Cale Makar negotiation. Is now the bar for highest paid player in the NHL is not 17, it's 18. Now, here's the other thing that impacts the Colorado Avalanche within the division. Reportedly, Dylan Larkin still upset at Detroit, still not buying into the Yzer plan, has expanded his list of teams that he would be willing to go to. Remember, it was Florida and it was Vegas and Minnesota. Now he is reportedly adding Dallas to the mix. Why Dallas and not Colorado? Could this be a state tax thing? But Dylan Larkin's still setting his sights very high when it comes to where he is willing to go. And look, we've talked about the player empowerment era that the NHL is entering into, and I think it will continue. I don't think Connor Hellebuck is staying on the Winnipeg Jets for the rest of his career. I don't think Dylan Larkin's going to be in Detroit through the rest of this contract. And I don't think Zach Werenski is going back to Columbus and is going to stay there. I still think that these guys are going to be looking to move because they have the ability to. I'm okay with Dylan Larkin opening up the places that he would go and them all being good teams. The issue was the super team thing is when you see Brady Tkachuk go to Florida to join his brother Matt, and you're saying, I want to join them. Right? Or I'm going to go to Vegas with Jack Eichel, and we'll get somebody else, to join us. When you there's a number, and it might be 4, it could be 5. But if Dylan Larkin has Minnesota on his list and has Dallas on his list, yes, it's in the same vein, perhaps, of wanting to play with his buddies, but at least he's giving. It's clear that he wants to win, and at least he's opening up a little bit. I don't think it's enough yet. I think he's going to have to open it up even more for Detroit to bite and grant his wishes. But if you open up 4 or 5 teams, that's a little bit different than saying Vegas, Florida. More Drive Time Sports after this. Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR. And don't forget, you can download the app for either one of those stations, preferably both, and listen to this or any of the shows that you enjoy on either of those two radio stations for free. You could also watch the show. Shouts to those of you who are, more and more of you every day. And I thank you for that, whether you're on Facebook, X, YouTube, or Twitch. You can find the live stream of this show if you want to interact, which I would also appreciate. You could drop a comment on the live stream that you are watching, or you can call or text in the show at 719-247-1313. Perhaps you have a thought or two on these, the three stories that are driving the show. Story number one. Christian Pulisic has been diagnosed with a bone bruise and microfracture of his leg, an injury he suffered in the loss to Belgium the other night. And the question that has to be asked coming from it, does it change your mind at all? There has been no one associated with this U.S. men's national team that has been more criticized and dumped on more than Christian Pulisic. Does this make you feel differently at all about that? And I think the answer is yes and no. Yes, because this is a little bit more serious than maybe a rolled ankle. But no, because as so many people like Carly Lloyd and Landon Donovan and Tim Howard have pointed out over the past couple of days, this is kind of the next step in a pattern from Christian Pulisic. That maybe he's not the guy to push through for this U.S. men's national team. He left the camp midway through so he could rest. He's been, somebody who it's been questioned before his willingness to give everything for the U.S. men's national team. And with that picture fully painted, I don't think he has earned the benefit of the doubt. Okay, it seems to be a bit more severe than what we all thought it was, but he is somebody that has perhaps not earned the benefit of the doubt when many of you on the text line already today have thrown out players who have played with collapsed lungs, broken ankles, high ankle sprains, torn ACLs, and have played for maybe stakes lower than the World Cup, if we're being honest about it. There aren't many stages that are bigger than the World Cup. And if these other athletes can push through, and look, he would be praised. Like we do this. If we find out that a guy is playing on a broken leg or has a torn ACL and is trying to play through it, or whatever the case may be, we say, man, that dude's a gamer. He gave it all, and we appreciate that. It's not that we would just shrug our shoulders at the idea that Christian Pulisic was playing with a microfracture in his leg. We would go, well, good for you. Well, I don't know. There would be some credit extended to him. I don't know the result of the other night. I don't know that anybody is getting any praise for anything. But you get what I'm saying. Like, we do tend to give a lot of credit to the athletes that play hurt, that play injured. And on that stage, you wonder, if not that stage, then what stage is there where Christian Pulisic is going to be that guy to maybe risk further injury to leave it all out there for his team. And it just leads you in a direction where you're going, I wonder if Pulisic Incorporated is maybe more important than the U.S. men's national team. And that is as bad of an indictment as you can levy against a guy, but you have to wonder. It's not just what happened against Belgium. It's what's happened the last few years as laid out perfectly by a Carly Lloyd, by a Tim Howard, and by a Landon Donovan. But I'll ask you if it changes your mind at all. Okay. More severe than maybe I thought the injury was. Was it still not one that you couldn't push through on that stage when your team was in a dire circumstance? I think it's fair to ask that question. Story number 2. You thought Kawhi Leonard was going to be a Raptor again? Not so fast, my friend. Both the Clippers and the Raptors coming out today in official team statements saying that they will not agree to the trade until the NBA's investigation of Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers for potential cap circumvention is completed and punishment is handed down. Because, according to both teams, whatever team Kawhi plays for, they're going to get punished, which makes zero sense to me. I think there's a world that you can allow Kawhi Leonard to play for the Raptors and punish the Clippers for their transgressions, but apparently the NBA is not capable of this, so here we are with this stalemate and with Kawhi back on the Clippers, Grady Dick, Brandon Ingram, and a few first-round picks back on the Toronto Raptors, and we all wait. I think if the Raptors, and don't forget the head of the board of governors in the NBA is the guy that owns the Raptors. You don't think that they have a little bit of an indication that maybe the hammer is going to come down on this in some way, shape, or form, and they're not willing to be the one to have the hammer put down on them? So I think there's a punishment here that's certainly going to happen. How severe that is Kawhi Leonard's contract with the Clippers going to be voided and the Raptors can basically have him for just money without giving up picks, without giving up players? Is the punishment going to be levied in terms of draft capital and fines against the Clippers, and then the Clippers will have even more reason to consummate the deal with the Raptors because they desperately need that draft capital back? That we don't know that yet. But right now, Kawhi Leonard, still a Clipper, with no guarantee that he's going to be back on the Raptors. Who knows what happens after the fallout of the NBA's investigation? I mean, the Raptors were kind of looked at as a sneaky team in the East. Not without Kawhi Leonard, they're not. So it has certainly ramifications when it comes to the Raptors, although the Raptors have come out and said that they are still fully committed to bringing Kawhi Leonard back to Ontario. But it also has impact on a local level because the Clippers are believed to be the last team standing in the way of the Nuggets getting a deal done with Peyton Watson. The Clippers were believed to be the last team out there that is willing to offer Peyton Watson a significant contract. And if the Clippers can't do that now because Kawhi Leonard is still on their books, now it opens it up for the Denver Nuggets to just negotiate one-on-one. It's only us, Clutch, that you can talk to. And the Nuggets can either squeeze Peyton Watson and say, we're only going to give you the qualifying offer, or they can say that we're willing to give you $25 or $30 million to keep you with the Denver Nuggets. I think that there should be a middle ground here, if you're asking my opinion on it. I don't think it's good because I would like to see Peyton Watson in a Nuggets uniform for the next few years. Not out on Peyton Watson. I just have a price. There's just a limit for a guy who has shown glimpses, but only that. If this is real, what you saw this season at times, you don't want to basically make it a foregone conclusion that he's going to leave as an unrestricted free agent next year, so you don't offer him the qualifying offer. But I've said all along, he's not worth upwards of $30 million. They just saw this with Christian Braun, who has contributed more to the Denver Nuggets over the course of his career than Peyton Watson has. We have to be fair here. He's not worth that contract. So does this open up the ability for the Denver Nuggets to say, look, we're not going 25, 30 million, but we also want to keep you on a multi-year deal. So here's 15, 17, 20. This creates more bargaining power for the Denver Nuggets. And also means if the Kawhi Leonard staying on the Clippers means the Clippers can't make a move for Peyton Watson, I mean, this almost guarantees that Peyton Watson, one way or another, is going to be a Denver Nugget this year. So there are a lot of ripple effects here that the NBA should probably try to wrap it up here. It's been 11 months. Let's figure it out. Did the Clippers circumvent the salary cap or not? Pablo Torre figured it out and put it on his podcast in like a month. What are you doing, NBA? Story number 3 is NHL insider Elliot Friedman theorizing when talking to other NHL people that the Colorado Avalanche were entertaining the idea of making a push for gold medal winning goaltender Connor Hellebuyck. And that has certainly surprised some Avalanche fans that look at the goaltending tandem that they have and go, why would you be looking to get rid of this? And I think that that's the easiest answer, or the easiest question to answer, because you would have a better goaltending situation with Connor Hellebuyck than you would Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood. And by the way, you could keep one of those two guys, probably Wedgwood, as the backup. This is a clear upgrade. I don't think that's up for debate. And I think Connor Hellebuyck would have a better chance of exercising those playoff demons playing behind Devon Taves and Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon. So I think it would be a great deal. I think it's an obvious upgrade. And this is where Joe Sakic's mind had to go after the season's over. You got swept out of the Western Conference Final. You need to be asking yourself, first and foremost, how do I make my team better? You like what you have in goal. Could you do better? Yes, you could. Connor Hellebuyck. But here becomes the problem. We've already seen the Avalanche make more cost-cutting moves than they have, in terms of bringing in players, right? They traded Ross Colton. They dumped Valerian Nichushkin. And they dumped Jack Drury to save money. They would have to do more of that if they wanted to acquire Connor Hellebuyck. And there's a tipping point here where you go, we'd love to have Connor Hellebuyck, but how much are we weakening the rest of our roster to bring him in? To say nothing of what Winnipeg would be asking, that would further weaken either the team that you have at the NHL level or your farm system or your future draft capital. So I think I can follow Joe Sakic's thought process here if what Elliot Friedman is saying is true. How do I make my team better? Well, goaltending is one place that I like it. It could be better. Can't do any better in today's NHL than Connor Hellebuyck. But then as you start to kind of flush it out and say, all right, what do we need in order to make this happen? You need more cap space, and you need to give Winnipeg a whole lot in order to acquire him. That's where I think it could have fallen apart in Joe Sakic's mind. Now, if there is truth behind what Elliot Friedman is saying, this immediately before the season even starts, you put Connor Hellebuck at the very top of the trade deadline shopping list for the Colorado Avalanche. If Joe Sakic's entertained this idea, it's not going to leave him once the season starts unless we see that Mackenzie Blackwood is playing at a Vezina Trophy level, which I think he's going to be good. I don't know if he's going to be that good. We know Joe Sakic likes the trade deadline as opposed to free agency in the offseason. And the Avalanche over the last few years have made significant moves around the trade deadline. This is a name to file away. I don't expect the Colorado Avalanche to be a lot different during the regular season than they were last year, which is a wagon and a Stanley Cup contender. And I also don't expect Winnipeg to be any different in terms of a team that's going nowhere fast. I don't think the circumstances are going to change. If Connor Hellebuck remains on Winnipeg when the season rolls along, I think he is going to become a prime trade candidate, and the Avalanche are going to be a team that is mentioned quite a bit with him. So just file that away and keep that in mind once the NHL season comes along. I'll take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. 719-247-1313. Pulisic, Kawhi, Hellebuck. Your thoughts. Very much welcome. That's what I think you need to know in terms of the sports world today. How about what you need to know in the financial world? For that, I turn to my friend Rick Stevens of FRS Financial Group for our daily market report, or as we call it, Rick's Best Guess. Rick, what happened today?
Well, markets were back in the green today as Iran requested coming back to the negotiating table after those U.S. strikes. Yesterday's tech sell-off gave investors a reason to buy today as we get to see SanDisk, Western Digital, Corning, Oracle, and Micron Technology all being up big. Now, after yesterday's market closed, we got those Fed minutes from the June meeting. As Chairman Warsh called it, we got to read about the family feud going on. Well, Rick's best guess after seeing those minutes is that we are unlikely to see a rate hike before the midterms in November. Back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Rick. That's Rick Stevens of FRS Financial Group right here in Colorado Springs. Start planning your future today at frsfinancialgroup.com.
Products and investment services offered through LPL Financial LLC. Member FINRA SIPC. FRS Financial Group is a name used by independent advisors associated with LPL Financial LLC.
We'll have more Drive Time Sports right after this on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. 719-247-1313 if you want to get involved in the conversation. Got a couple of texts in. First on Christian Pulisic, laid out talking about other players who have played through injury on the biggest stage, and in a lot of those stages not as big as the World Cup stage, and toughing it out. And Christian Pulisic wondering if he could have. And this from the 719, all those other players play real sports. I feel like this kind of talk about soccer, and I'm not saying that you've been waiting, hiding behind it or anything like that, but I feel like it's kind of like the criticism for Christian Pulisic. I think there are people who don't understand why we've gotten super into the World Cup because they don't like soccer, but have maybe bided their time while everyone's enjoying the World Cup, just waiting for it to all come crashing down and the U.S. to get eliminated, and then back to the soccer sucks takes. It's kind of like the Christian Pulisic. You can't really go in on Christian Pulisic when the U.S. is winning and he's looking great against Paraguay and it's all good vibes and it's all this team's awesome. You really can't lay into him. You got to wait for the right moment. U.S. gets eliminated, embarrassed really. Here comes Carly Lloyd. Here comes Landon Donovan. Here comes Tim Howard. And also along with it, here comes the anti-soccer rhetoric. That's fine. I disagree. I think that soccer is a real sport. It's a sport that I love and enjoy. But we can disagree. And I respectfully do that. I think Christian Pulisic plays a real sport. But in terms of the physicality, in terms of, the gladiator mentality, I will grant you that if you started to rank athletes from different sports, you'd start with football and hockey and the UFC, and you'd start to work your way down to baseball and basketball, and you'd probably end up after a few other sports mentioning soccer. I have to be fair about that, but still, there are tough guys playing soccer. They just act like they've been shot. It's all tactics, right? Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, back me up on this. Albert says no one was upset with Jocelyn Thibault's play when the Avalanche traded for Waugh. Money. Perfect. Why say many word when less word do trick? You have a chance to get the best goaltender walking planet Earth. You do it. The question is whether the Avalanche actually have the chance to get Connor Hellebuck. They would need to shed more salary, and I'm looking at what the Avalanche have, and if I'm Winnipeg, I'm going, I don't think I want much of this. Would you be willing? Well, since we can play this game, would you be willing to? I'll bring up two players that have maybe fallen out of a little bit of favor with Avalanche fans to make it easy, because obviously no one wants to trade Cale Makar or Nathan McKinnon. What about, would you give up Brock Nelson and Mackenzie Blackwood? I don't know if money would work. I'm just saying as a thought exercise. Would you give up Brock Nelson? You'd have to move one of your goalies. So pick a goalie and Brock Nelson. I don't think that's enough to get it done, but let's just say that could be the framework of the deal. Would you be willing to do that to get Connor Hellebuck? Watching Carter Hart throughout these playoffs, watching the goaltending that Carolina got, you do have Nazem Kadri. I would consider it. If that's all it would cost, I would be seriously considering it if I'm Joe Sakic. I know Nazem Kadri is not what he was when the Avs won the Stanley Cup, but I mean, they think highly enough of him to make him a top six. Like they traded Valeri Nichushkin and said, Nas is going to be in our top six. You just be sliding him over. Yeah, it would create another void that you'd have to figure out. Could you slide Jaden Schwartz up to the second line? Not what you brought him in intending for him to play, but is he capable of playing on the second line? I'd consider that. How about next one? What if it was name your goalie and Marty Necas for Connor Hellebuck? Now this is a little tricky, isn't it? Because now you're talking about a 100-point guy and your top winger. And I know Landeskog is more important for a lot of reasons, but your most talented, most prolific winger is Marty Necas. That one is tough. I think at that point, you'd have to be looking at Winnipeg and saying, well, what about one of your wingers? Can we turn one of these guys into the next Marty Necas? I think that would be a tougher sell. Even though Marty Necas is, not everyone's favorite Av after, the way he ended the playoffs. But then again, Nazem Kadri. But that's kind of how I would look at it. Because they're going to ask for more. And if you're Winnipeg, if you're giving up Connor Hellebuck, it's probably not even Brock. Marty Necas, maybe. I don't know that Brock Nelson would be a guy that they're looking for. Would you be willing to give up Sam Malinsky in a deal like that? I like Sam Malinsky. I think I'd rather have Connor Hellebuck. So keep it in mind. I'm not saying that, mark my words, Connor Hellebuck is going to be an Av by the end of this upcoming season. I actually don't think he will be. And I think there's a higher possibility that Connor Hellebuck is not on the Jets by the time we begin the season than he ends up on the Avalanche at some point. I don't think that the Buffalo stuff has died down. And what about New Jersey? I mean, they need to take a big swing, don't they? But if Hellebuck gets through this offseason and is on the Winnipeg Jets roster at the beginning of the season, I think we're going to see more. Even if it's not reporting, there's going to be more thought exercises like this one where you're like, okay, how about Connor Hellebuck? What would you give up for him? And it's funny that and Patrick Waugh obviously is a perfect comparison. Could you imagine, couldn't you see a Patrick Waugh the way that Patrick Waugh ended in Montreal? Couldn't you kind of see that in Winnipeg? Right, that Connor Hellebuck in a playoff game gets pulled. We've certainly seen that before, and maybe he already has it in his mind that he wants to play in the United States, and then he blows up like Patrick Waugh did. I mean, it could follow a familiar pattern here, and the Avs could be the beneficiary. I think Connor Hellebuck is a little bit more chill than Patrick Waugh, though. I don't think we would see quite the reaction from Connor Hellebuck that Patrick Waugh had all those years ago in Montreal. Yep, keep it in mind. I think this isn't the last that we've discussed, that we will discuss the possibility of or the desire you may have to have Connor Hellebuck on the Colorado Avalanche if he doesn't move teams by the beginning of the season. This text coming in, more soccer hate. You know, I don't filter the text. You want to have your say, have your say. Soccer is so boring. I haven't watched 1 second of the World Cup and never will. I honestly don't even know what you're talking about. All I know is that he plays soccer. So it sounds about right that he didn't play because he was hurt. And yes, I'm glad they lost so I don't have to listen to sports talk radio talk about soccer, except you still are. So there's that. That's from Eric. Yeah, you got about, well, since you brought up soccer, Eric, not me, France beat Morocco today 2-0. No, don't. I don't know if this is the last thing out of the U.S. men's national team that we'll talk about, but certainly the World Cup conversation on this show will be a little bit less frequent. And that's not because, with all due respect, because of your text. It's just because the U.S. is out. To your point, not quite as relevant to us. But I'm still locked in. And if I have my thoughts, I will share it. I don't know why you would be glad that the U.S. lost. Wish them well, but also maybe not be upset. You do you. I'm not telling you what to be. 719-24-7. 1313. We'll take a break. And we got one more segment. Man, today has flown by. More after this. I always like to, if I can, give you something that you can take from this show and apply to your daily life. Piece of wisdom, piece of advice. I didn't really have anything today in that vein until this all came along. So, Jacob Toby, who was the play-by-play man for the San Antonio Spurs, he actually worked at 9 News in Denver, is no longer the Spurs play-by-play man because he was accused by his girlfriend of cheating on her with the sister of one of the Spurs players. Lindy Waters, I believe, is the player. She apparently commandeered his phone the other night, put out an Instagram post that was written as in first person, as if it was Jacob Toby speaking and saying, I cheated on my girlfriend with the sister of a player on the Spurs. And about 24 hours later, he has lost his job. So the piece of advice that you can take from this, or the lesson learned, is that you should not cheat on your girlfriend with the sister of one of the players on an NBA team. I know what you were thinking, that this is a naturally occurring thing and it would be okay. It is not. Just know it is not. So the next time you are the play-by-play voice of an NBA team, don't give in to temptation. It's not worth it. There is a precedent that has been set. And you just shouldn't do it. So there you go. There's the useful tidbit, the piece of wisdom to share. I don't know if I saw Colin Cowherd mention this today, whether he didn't know if it was legal for them to fire him over accusations of cheating. And it's not with a player on the team, it's with his family member. So, yeah, it's a little... I understand that you're like, is this really grounds for firing somebody? I'll counter with this. Do you think it's a good idea? If you have your dream job, okay, and I don't know this guy, but I got to imagine this was his dream job. I don't know if this is something that you say, you know what, this would be a good idea. This would be enriching to my life. Because I don't know that the player on the Spurs would love the situation, and that's somebody that you kind of, I'll say, work with. It's not really that you're working with him, but like you're around him and you're like on the team plane and you're interviewing him. There's a clip going around of him interviewing this player. I don't know the legality of what the Spurs have done, and that's a whole nother issue. I'll just say, why would you think this was a good idea? To say nothing of just the initial act of allegedly cheating on your girlfriend. Like, that's not good. I think we can agree. It's not a good thing to do. Now, should that affect your job? No. Unless, maybe you're the head coach of the New England Patriots and the person And here's the thing. As I bring Mike Vrabel into the conversation, it's kind of similar to the Jacob Toby situation here, because I don't think where it became such a big scandal and people wondered, including myself, whether Mike Vrabel would remain the head coach of the New England Patriots if the headline was just simply he cheated on his wife, allegedly. That's not good. That's not behavior that you want from the leader of your football team. But I don't think it would call into question whether he should remain the head coach. For better or worse, right or wrong, I just don't think it would. But when he's alleged to have had an affair with Diana Rossini, who covers the team, from a national basis, now this becomes more of a story, not just because it's more salacious, because now both of the people involved in this alleged affair, but there's some, it feels like there's a line being crossed in all of this. And it's the same with Jacob Toby. Like, I don't know if him cheating on his girlfriend would get him fired from being the play-by-play broadcaster for the San Antonio Spurs. But there may be a line here that you shouldn't cross, which is cheating on your girlfriend with the sister of one of the players on the Spurs. I don't think it's that he cheated on his girlfriend. I think it's very much who he cheated on her with. And in a world, and I'll just say this as somebody in the sports media landscape, like, all of us are super replaceable. Right? Maybe if you're at the Pat McAfee, Charles Barkley level of sports media, maybe you're not. Anything below that, you absolutely are. So maybe don't do something that would give them a reason to replace you. So up and coming young broadcasters. If you're thinking of entering a career of play-by-play, now you have this piece of information that you could just file away. If a situation like this were to arise, that a team has fired somebody for this. So that's not great, but it happened. Let's see. Do I have enough time? Yeah, I think I do. I want to play this clip. So Caitlin Clark is in the news again, and she was supposed to play Alyssa Thomas tonight, the player that put her fist in her throat, but Caitlin Clark will not play against the Phoenix Mercury. I think Alyssa Thomas is being suspended for too many technicals, if I read that right. But Caitlin Clark's not playing tonight. But she is in the news because this idea that the WNBA is jealous of her and is mistreating her has come up again. I believe this was David Dennis Jr. on First Take this morning on ESPN. Okay. And I have a few issues with this. First of all, okay, the she was the 11th most votes to be in the top four. You could make a better argument that she's one of the four best guards in the league. Okay, like she shouldn't have the 11th most votes. If she's outside of the top four, she should be like maybe fifth or sixth. Okay, so I disagree with the premise that Caitlin Clark is. It's not crazy at all that she was in 11th place among guards. I think that is crazy. And the other two things that I would point out is one, I think the physicality against Caitlin Clark has been a little bit more than I recall other young players getting in, let's say, the NBA. Secondly, we are into year 3 of Caitlin Clark. At what point is she not a young player anymore? When is she accepted? At what point is she going to be accepted into the sisterhood of the WNBA? This is year 3. As a rookie, okay, I can maybe see this a little bit more. We're 3 years in here. At what point is she going to be accepted and is not a young player anymore? And here's the other part, too. The other leagues that he's talking about are not in this situation where their success is fragile like the WNBA's is. They were a niche sport, a niche league that didn't have much attention. Caitlin Clark brought a whole lot more, and this stuff is turning people off of it. They gave the WNBA the chance, and now they don't give it a chance anymore because they don't like this stuff. Okay, so I've never said that the players should just bow down to her, but I feel like they do cross a line, and I do think that it is a level of contempt for the attention that she gets. Is that not petty jealousy? Like, I get it. If you can come up with kind of an argument for the other side, then you can cut through a lot of the noise. But I have to, I don't come up with takes just to be on the opposite side of people. It's what I believe, right or wrong, or however smart or stupid I sound. It's what I really believe. I feel like this is somebody trying to pivot the other way. We've been seeing this for 3 years now. We know what this is. They resent her, and they take every opportunity to take out some of that frustration on her. And it's not good for the league. And it crosses the line of physicality quite a bit. And it's not in the best interest of the league. That these players all say that they want what's best for the league. What you're doing, not what's best for the league. Talk to you tomorrow.